Sewing friends, we are having some fun today. Welcome. If you are your very first time here, then extra welcome. My name is Evelyn Wood and I'm the creator of VintageSewingSchool.com. Now, as I said already, what we're doing in this video is taking a deep dive into the clothes that we own, and I specifically am going to look into these ones here. So I was just sitting here, just doing this, getting all carried away and like, totally nerding out on all of the details in here. And for me, when I do that, it makes me think, I bet that you would also love to nerd out with me and have a look at all the details, because this is how I learnt garment construction. Is I would look inside the clothes that I own to notice all the little details, to teach myself different, like deconstruct the techniques that they've used here to then learn new sewing techniques, new ways to finish things. Seeing what good quality looks like, what bad quality looks like, and noticing these things. And all this is sitting in your wardrobe already, all this wealth of information. So instead of me just going down the rabbit hole by myself, you're welcome. Let's go down it together and have a real good look inside these. And I bet you'll be really interested too as to some of the details that I found. Just a note before we keep going is that in no way is this video about the seamstress who made any of these items, because these are thrifted, most likely they're fast fashion items, and we all know they're not even made by one person. So each of these seams would have been made by a different person, and that's how they're constructed, and that's what it's not about that at all. This is merely looking at clothing that we own and deconstructing those ideas from that. So it has nothing to do with the person who sewed this at all. That's not this video. Okay, first one, let's start with, well, here they two are. You can see where my fashion taste is headed, right? Let's have a look at this one to begin with, just to give you an idea of the overall design and what we're looking at when we go close. Little scoop neck. So what really got my attention and where I first started looking was these pleats, because they are gorgeous. Or I should say gathering, but on closer inspection is what I was looking at, is I really noticed that they are so uniform and they're more like little tucks and pleats the whole way around. And in this fabric in particular, it's almost like they're tiny little mini cartridge pleats that kind of almost sit vertical and you get that look. To me, that sort of gives me the feeling of what these look like. Particularly even more concentrated around the top of the arm here. There's a verticalness to them and they are just beautiful. And given that the uniform nature of them, what I started to notice and obviously think was that these are definitely created via a pleater, a foot attachment or something like that. They've obviously been done by a machine, very fast. And if we look down, yes, one of these sleeves here, I was just looking before, I can see a row of stay stitching. Now I know it might be hard on camera there to see, that is, I know it's stay stitching because it's a very long width of stitch, and it's still visible in some spots. So obviously it would have been nice to remove it, but wasn't going to happen in this garment. I actually don't think that stitch is what has created the little the pleats and the gathering here. It just, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it just doesn't feel like it was to me. It feels like that stitch was additional, which means they probably pleated it in one and then added a stay stitch as well to actually then create the little cuff and all the ruffles there along with it. And obviously didn't come back to remove any stay stitching, which I know you and I would definitely do if this was our garment though. Of course, on top of wanting one of those little pleating machines to make these like micro pleats, I love the fullness that it gives over the shoulder here. And I really, that's what got my attention. I'd love to be able to replicate that. So looking closer at how the pleats were constructed and what they look like, it is not simply sort of drawing one piece of thread in and gathering it in. It's got a different look and feel to it, and then makes me think, how can I replicate that? And while I think I would need a fancy foot attachment, not that that's out of realm of possibility, to do that. The next point of interest on this garment was the actual front V placket here. This is the part of the neckline here where it comes down. So what they've done is it could use definitely a good press, but it has been bound. So if we look on the other side here, notice we've got binding, so a bias binding. And I was just looking down here thinking, what is going on with this little point here? And so it appears that it just doesn't quite sit right. So I had a little look underneath here to see what is going on. Have they made anything fancy but no, it's literally just the bias binding that they've probably, if I was to undo that stitch, I could lay this out straight and bound the entire edge like this as a little placket, as you normally would. And then all they've done is stitched a little V dart into the binding to create the V for the V-neck. But unfortunately, when we look at the front here and we kind of lay these together, front and front, you can see that that V was made off center and wasn't quite right, unfortunately. But I don't, because of the bagginess of this top, I don't think it's going to affect the overall look, and obviously doesn't. But it's those small little details, and makes me think how really easy that is, this finish is on the front. But one little thing like just getting that V off makes a big difference. So just all you need to do is a little dart, a little V, and there you go. This is a construction technique that you can absolutely deconstruct by looking where the seams are, pull it apart in your mind, or for real if you want to see how it was made to begin with. So this I really like. It's a very easy technique to finish this V off with. Looking at the hems here, nothing really special there. They would have just used a hem machine where it just folds over and stitches it at the one time together. There is a little flaw in the fabric though there, as I just noticed now. And let's have a look at the seams on this one. So all the seams are the same, and they have been done on a 5-thread overlocker. So that means a fancy overlocker where you've got 5 different spools and it's doing all the overlocking and your straight stitch at the same time, which I think about 95% of all garments in any store, any country, are going to be made with that construction method because it's so much faster. One way I know is because, well, how uniform it is. So it always ends up being about this 1 centimeter seam allowance. You have your overlocking, and the distances are always very, very straight and neat, because if you try and do this yourself manually by sewing the seam and then overlocking, it's never that uniform, right? But the real tell is when you turn it over to the underside, and you can see that it's kind of got this odd looking stitch on the back, and this is actually a chain stitch. So this is different than what your regular sewing machine does, is a lock stitch, and the stitching on the top and the bottom where the bobbin thread is look the same, right? This is different, and so when it's a chain stitch, because you've had one of these garments where you pull the thread and the entire thread just keeps coming off. That's because that one thread is just looped in a chain to create the stitch. And so that's how they work as well. And so I can actually see it's fairly loose. And I bet if we are to fold this back over and open up, you'll probably see the seam sort of opens up a little bit, and you can see those stitches in there. And probably the tension could have been a little bit tighter, but because it's a loose fit garment, it won't matter. So nothing to worry about, but it is interesting, right? How it's made in these little details. And if we look for overall garment construction, it has been sewn with not a set-in sleeve. It is, we have our raglan here. So what they've done is sewn each of the raglan and then sewn up the side seam and the sleeve in one, which is quite common for this style of garment. So nothing unexpected there. Besides a lot of loose threads around the binding and the neckline needing to be snipped off and neatened up, I really do enjoy this one. I think it's been quite fairly well made, particularly a lot of attention with those pleats to get that right look. Some messy threads, which is kind of normal, and unfortunately that little V at the front, but again, kind of normal. When you actually look closely at garments, you'll find that they're almost never perfect, so it is completely normal. Let's have a look at this next one though, and to give you an idea, we are looking at a very similar style. I think they might have come from the same person who donated them, thankfully for me. It's going to be nice and cool for summer. Now this one's a nice rayon, but let's have a close look at this one. Because what I was really interested in is looking at the sort of peasant style tops and blouses, and looking at the different finishes. How do they get the ruffles across here? How have they finished the necklines? Because I might be thinking and planning of making a few. So it's always interesting to me to have a look and deconstruct the techniques. For example, on this one here, the front little opening that we've got here is actually finished differently. So you can see the stitching on the front here, and if we turn it over, you'll notice that it's got a bias facing on this one, which is really nice. It's one of my favorite finishing techniques, of course, if you didn't know that already. And to get the V, it's actually sewn into the garment here, which is really interesting. And I like to look and think, how did they do that? So let's have a look. Where's my little pointer? So we've got one coming down here, and then it's overlapped itself through here on top of each other. But I'm actually noticing right now that this here in this point is kind of not stitched, and I can actually fit my little awl here all the way through. And right here at this point is actually the fabric, the front of the fabric. So our right side is actually like, that's it, the cut edge right on here on that little pointy V. So that is a little distressing because that will probably fray and come out. So I might have to put a little fray check on this one if I want to machine wash this anyway. Yeah, okay. I don't think I'd probably replicate this exactly myself. I definitely want to do something on that little point. And it's clearly been stitched when they did their understitching. So this row here is the last, so let's pretend that's not there. And then our understitching, which is this one, they've come down and then stopped and then come down this one all the way, and then must have folded it over here and then continued stitching from here down, and had to obviously trim that corner to get there. See, work backwards. Think where the top stitches are, think about, take them off and layer. What has to go on top of each other to get it, do it in reverse, and that's your order of construction, or reverse it again. And this particular one has created its gathers by some elastic. Now, these little ties are just tied in at the front here. They do not go all the way around. In these tubes are, in our casing I should say, technically, but the little tubes you see through here, this casing has the elastic in it, and it is a casing because I can actually move that elastic around in there. So that's how I know it is a casing method as well. They have stitched at the raglan seams at the back to kind of just tack a few in place so that the elastic doesn't go a bit too wild. And if we pull out this back piece, you can see that along the top edge, this is the garment here, and it's been sewn on with a casing with this like separate ribbon, if you will, like a little band, a strip of fabric to create this frill has been then used to encase and use that casing, because the casing only comes to here. So that's been folded under, in here, stitched, and then the elastic pulled through. So you get this like cute little ruffle look at the end, which is a really neat idea. I think it works really well. And having a look at the sleeves, they are just finished with elastic, and there is so much fabric in here. Even when I pull this out, there is still gathers and like gathering in the sleeves, so there is a lot of fabric in there to create this beautiful voluminous sleeve, which tells me how much fabric that you actually need to create this big poofy look. So because we always think that like we always use not enough fabric, I think, and things like that. Let's have a look at the seams, the real tell, because this is super weird. There is a kind of line of stitching. So clearly they've actually stitched this separately to the overlocking, which is weird to begin with for clothing. As I said on the last one, like 95% of all clothes are made with a overlock and stitch all in one. But this is not. This has a lock stitch, and it's all of the garments, and there's like a little tuck here. So looking real close, you can see that there's a line of stitching here, and it's not the seam. When we look at the seam on the outside, there is no stitching whatsoever. There's no visible stitching on this outside. So it's not a like felled seam, or it's not been top stitched down at all. Oh my goodness, I think I figured it out. I'm not sure why, but what I think that how they've made this is that they have overlocked the pieces together first, possibly stay stitched it, because that's a lock stitch. There's stay stitching along here on the inside that's not part of the seam, so to say, that's only on the 2 layers, the same as the overlocking. And it's a longer stitch, so they must have then stay stitched them after overlocking or at the same time, but it's kind of wonky, they're not uniform together, so I think they were done differently. But then what has happened is they have then pulled it and actually stitched it like this. So kind of like what you do with a French seam, but it's not a French seam at all because you've got this on the inside. And they've stitched it along here, and that is what has then created the actual seam on the outside. That is one of the most bizarre things that I have ever seen. So if this is to sit flat, you've actually ended up with this little like pin tuck on the seam, which is really, really odd. All right, I have never seen that before, ever, and I don't know why they actually chose to do that. I don't know. And if we look at this pretty little scalloped edge at the bottom here, you'll notice, if you look really, really closely, although it's quite well done and is very uniform and you've got this point, this side seam along here has been seamed after that this scallop has been made. So they've just got fabric and cut it right at the right spot, so you still get that nice scallop at the side seams, which is really nice. And they have finished it reasonably well with stitching the seam over so it doesn't fall out the bottom, which is quite nice. So, which is definitely something that you can replicate, and when you would do exact same thing at home if you had a scalloped edge to deal with as well. So I told you, isn't it fascinating looking inside and deconstructing the ways that these are made? You know, in this one, we've looked at different hemming techniques with scalloped edges, different seaming techniques, an all-in-one sleeve versus set-in sleeve, how they've gotten gathers in the same look via elastic, via the pleats and a binding. What else have we looked at? That weird overlocking seam stitch. I'm still not sure what that is for, but maybe I'll think about it later. And how the V finishes are finished in the slits. There's many different ways here that now I am now learning and looking at what I like and what I want to apply to my next garment. So I hope it gives you an idea of what to look for and the things to start noticing and looking at, and how to deconstruct the techniques and finishes and all the stitching that you see inside some garments that are sitting right inside your wardrobe now, so you can apply them to your own sewing. Because this is really how you learn garment construction. And when you learn garment construction, you get to choose what finishes and what look you want to do rather than just following the pattern and whatever it tells you to do. Teach yourself this and you will be able to go off pattern, as I like to call it, and you won't need to follow those instructions. You can make up your own. And I know that's the goal that we all have, right? I'd love to know, how did you find this interesting? Our garment archaeology section here that we like to do. Your regulars will have seen this before and know it. Let me know, have you ever found anything interesting inside your own clothing before? Have you done this? Or are you going to have a look now? I would love to know down below. And I'll link some other videos in the description box too on some other, I think, garment construction videos that I think you'll find really, really fascinating as well. And well, we can all get very, very nerdy in our sewing as well. All right, until next time, my sewing friends, happy sewing. Bye.